Hey there guys, one more tutorial before we get into the actual modeling of it. And that is basically the mindset that you should be using as you're looking at your reference and bouncing back to 3D view. So I'm going to show you, this is my character, right? She has a lot of stuff going on. She has this sash. She has vials in that sash. They're attached with straps. She has a shoulder pad, a shirt, an undershirt, gloves. There's a lot of stuff, right? And this is probably going to be more detailed than your characters are. And that's not a slight at you guys at all. Like, you should see my first character. That thing is like super basic. And that's all, like, we're an intro class, right? So that's what those are our only requirements, right? And that's perfect. That's perfect for us. So when you open up your image planes and you have them in Maya, that's when you start to be like, okay, I might be getting overwhelmed here, because there's a lot of detail that you need to capture. But before you start laying down verts and start doing multi-cuts and stuff and insert edge loops, just take a minute and think about your drawing in terms of vocabulary that we've been using, sort of like edge loops and extrusions and all of that kind of terminology, right? Because that's what it basically can boil down to, is extrusions and edge loops. It's just a matter of getting those into position. And notice how she has multiple different parts, right? Like, this shoulder pad is a completely separate object, right? I'm drawing with a mouse, so don't rag on me too hard. But this is a completely separate object from this sash, right? They probably are connected with some sort of buckling mechanism underneath. But we don't see that, and so we don't need to model it. So when you're modeling this, these don't need to be the same mesh. You don't need to make like, all right, there's topology that leads up to this, but then I need to get this corner really sharp, so I need to add an edge loop there. Like, nah, if you can keep these as separate meshes, then by all means, it's going to make your life a lot easier, and you're going to get better looking results. Because you'll probably have, if you go through this and you're like, okay, I need to make this, 1 second. Let me add another layer. I need to make this bottle go fuse to match up with her topology. Maybe if her edge loops are running this way, then and this bottle needs to extrude out of her somehow. Like, nah, that bottle is a completely separate thing, dude. Don't worry about it. Just model it separately. It's gonna have its own topology, and it's gonna look a lot nicer that way. So what I like to do is I like to go in and kind of draw and set up where I think my edge loops are going to be. So for this type of thing, it's probably just going to be very square-like, right? And it kind of wraps over the shoulder. So these edges are going to kind of taper off over there. And it has a little bit of roundness to it, so I'm going to need an edge loop across like that. And probably one right here. That's probably as close as it's gonna get. And let's look at her arms. This is gonna need an edge loop, right? And this shape, I will basically, since it follows the form of her overshirt, right? And it's gonna have a bunch of edge loops on here, we're basically just going to be able to extrude that shape out of the shirt, right? It'll be much easier. I'm going to do it on this side as well to show you. And as far as this shirt goes, right, this is gonna have to be an edge loop right there to extrude out. Like we're gonna have a loop of edges right there, and then we're gonna extrude out to make the shirt. And we're gonna have some supporting edge loops, so when her arms bend, the geometry can deform nicely. This loop is gonna have to come to that point, right? So our mesh is gonna look, the wireframe of it is gonna look something like that, right? And I would probably just move this edge out first and then insert this edge loop after I already have this nice pointed shape. Then I would extrude that out to get it to be the width of that, and then I would extrude it out again to give it that thickness, right? Because there's that little part right there that pops out. And so it'll have the same topology as the underlying stuff, except they'll be just a little bit further out, you know. And the inside arm, I want it to have the same amount of spans as this arm. And I usually, when I'm doing an arm, I usually keep it to 12 edges. So if you imagine the arm basically as a cylinder, I try to keep it to have 12 or 16 edges. Like this right here would be 4, correct? And this would be 8. And 8 is fine also. That's when you get into like sort of like N64 territory of graphics. That's fine, you know. Like this is intro to computer animation. Like I'm not going to be like, your modeling skills aren't current gen. Like, come on, you guys are just learning the program. But if you want to push harder, feel free to go a little bit more dense. Don't go overboard with it though, guys. Like, if I can just draw these across now. Like this is what it would look like with 8 spans, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I like 12 for a little bit more density. And so then you get an extra edge on each of these little parts. But but 16 is really nice because then you have really nice quads over here. You'll have nice topology at the ends of your mesh. But again, it all depends on how much fidelity you want on this model, you know. So that's something to keep in mind for that. But if we go back into drawing, so this arm will have the same amount of spans as this. They're just gonna be a little bit closer together, you know. So we would extrude those out and definitely have an edge loop at the elbow because that's going to be a bending shape. You need topology at any of these joints, right? And it needs to be able to support the deformation of the object. Right there, right there. Right there. All right. And then the same with the hand. But the hand gets a lot more complex, right, guys? Like it has this little fold right here. It has this little inset. This inset and that fold could just be done with texturing, though. Just painting that detail on there. So we won't worry too much about that. But what is different is the fingers, right? The fingers are going to be real annoying to do. Because you have to have an edge loop right there, right, for the thumb. And then it's going to have to extrude out. And I usually keep thumbs and fingers down to like 8 polys, 8 on the edge. Pretty much how this is right now. Let me erase this edge though. because that's a bit misleading. It'll be a shape like this. It'll look like that on each finger. And so since she has 4 digits, right, there's going to be an edge loop at each of those fingers, right? And it's going to pop out, so they're each going to be an extrusion. And we'll show you a quick way to do that. And these edge loops are going to go all the way down here and then terminate at the caps of the fingers. This collar shape, right, that's going to be a series of polys. So we're going to have an edge loop here that goes around and dips down into the collar. Now, there's a few ways we could do this. We could just extrude this downward and then have it that way, or you'll have but then you'll have like kind of a really stretched out face. So you might want to draw the continuation of that edge loop, whoops, across. Then you'll notice that you still have a quad. Oops. Still have a quad, 1, 2, 3, 4 edges. But then you have this triangle, and you're like, oh, that's kind of annoying, because 1, 2, 3, and it would, if you could see the bottom, it would terminate down here in 3. But you can kind of just make an edge loop, or multi-cut an edge right here, and then keep that as a relatively straight piece, because then you can continue that edge loop across the rest of your mesh, right? And same way right here. But this edge loop, this would be an edge loop as well, going around there. And so you guys see kind of how I'm thinking about this now, right? And I'm going to upload some documents that have good edge flow for like faces and stuff, because they get really complex. Like faces, we look at them all the time. They're really complex shapes with a lot of detail on them. But I just want you guys to start thinking about these divisions before you get into the midst of them. This is a little bit too high density for you guys, like what I've been drawing. I would probably do half of this for you guys since you're starting out, but like that's my internal thoughts going on the paper there. And then this is gonna have an edge loop clearly that goes around here, and this could be 1. Dun, 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 dun. And these bottles are a separate object, right? So let's just model them separately. Like, we don't have to fit our topology to those bottles' needs, you know? Like, that's just going to be a little bit of a waste of time. Same with the strap on top of there. That's going to be a little bit of a waste. But yeah, so I want you guys thinking in that sort of mindset, rather than getting stressed out, being like, oh man, there's so much to look at. Just break it down into its more simple shapes, you know, and then it'll slowly start to come together. But you will run into problems where it's like, oh man, how do I resolve this leading into the arm? It's like, well, then that's when you kind of start having to think about like anatomy, because usually the bicep, which would be a muscle like right here, kind of flows into the pec muscle. So we kind of want our topology to mimic that, right? So we'd probably have this edge bend and start dipping into that shape. And you're going to see that reflected when we start modeling this. But so I want you guys to start thinking about this kind of stuff before you hop into your model. And as always, please look at Sketchfab. Sketchfab has so many models that are well done. Like, please look at them. Like, it'll be super helpful for you guys. But But yeah, so I just want you guys thinking about that before you leap in and start just making stuff all willy-nilly, you know. And don't forget, don't go too dense at the start. Keep it low poly. Keep it like this resolution, you know, and you should be fine. All right, thanks.